So this weekend, I beat Atomfall. I want to talk about this game because this is not what I thought this game would be. I thought it was going to be very much like Stalker or Fallout, a first-person shooter with quite a bit of action, you running around a radioactive wasteland, looking to explore and take on bad guys. Yeah, no, that's not Atomfall at all. But does that mean Atomfall's a bad game? I don't think it does, but let's hang out and talk about Atomfall. But before we do, please hit that like and subscribe button, help my channel grow. It really means a lot to me. Anyway, so Atomfall first got my attention because it really did look a lot like Fallout. You know, the more old school Fallout. Think Fallout 3, 4, that type of era. Or maybe even like a Bethesda game. First person view, lots of exploring, lots of combat, that kind of thing. But that's not really what Atomfall is. Now, yes, it is a first person view and there is exploration, quite a bit of it, but really the combat is where things are different. Although before we do get into the combat, let's go over the story real quick, and we can do this pretty quickly because the story itself does really open up as you play the game. And I would do you a massive disservice to explain the story, because one of the best things about the game is actually how the story unravels and how you're trying to figure out this mystery, how it plays out, and even to give you too much of the story could potentially ruin it just because of how short the actual story is. If you're going just by the campaign, you'll beat this game in 10 to 12 hours, and that might even be on the longer side of it. It's a relatively short game, but the premise itself is relatively simple and one that's been done time and time again, and that is where you wake up, you're in an area you're unfamiliar with, you have amnesia, you don't know exactly what's going on or where anyone is or where you're at or who you are, none of that, and you're just trying to figure all of that out. Now, the area that you're in is a quarantine zone. There was an accident that had to do with a certain device and potential radiation and a lot of other issues like that, and you're essentially just trying to figure out what happened, how to fix it, how you can get out of this quarantine zone, and that's just essentially how the game plays out. And as I myself explored this kind of wasteland, a few things that I noticed right off the bat is the importance of crafting. That was very huge. Most of everything that you can find or improve or upgrade all comes from crafting. And not only are you on the lookout for different materials and things like that that you can use, but also for crafting recipes themselves. And there is quite a bit of time spent just going through what you have and trying to figure out what you could possibly upgrade or what you could make, and essentially cleaning your inventory as well. Now, luckily, there are enough areas throughout the quote-unquote wasteland that you can kind of drop some of your items, pick them up later, store them in like a tube. Sounds weird to say, but this tube kind of runs through the entire area. But it is kind of important to make sure that you have enough things crafted, especially for health, or if you need something for your weapons, that you have that done before you start sorting out your materials. I learned that the hard way. The other lesson I learned relatively early is it's sort of important to avoid combat. See, as much as I wanted it to be a Fallout style game, but one of those games where you kind of just roll through like a badass and you're ready to fight whatever, yeah, this is not it, and you definitely don't want to. The moment that you run across some bandits, and you will find tons of them, and they run in packs, you definitely want to avoid them because you just can't handle them. There's too many of them, especially early on. Now, as the game goes on, you do get some better weapons, but even then, I would say, like, combat is iffy. Like, yes, you're going to have to do it sometimes, and it is part of the game, but you're not that great at it. Or at least I wasn't. I found myself in situations where, especially later, I'd say mid part of the game, I almost said later in the game, but mid part of the game, where combat was just frustratingly difficult. And I almost just avoided everyone that I could because I knew I'd be overwhelmed relatively quick. Even though, let's say, a certain type of weapon like a gun can almost do one shot, one kill, there's still so many of them, and the amount that you're getting hit and how slow it is to reload, it just doesn't end up working out for you most of the time. And I can just say, like, I died a ton of times being very stubborn and just running into like these areas with the bandits and feeling like I'm gonna get them one way or another, and I would end up spending like an hour just redoing this dumb stuff. At the end of the day, it made no difference. I should have just snuck around them, would have been a lot easier and a lot quicker. But I was so convinced that I was just trying to make this game something that it's not. And really what it is it's more of a survival type game and honestly a little bit of a horror game, which I didn't really see that coming either. But as you're exploring some of the areas, you realize it's pretty creepy. You'll be in these abandoned areas that are incredibly dark and with a lot of tunnels and deep ladders, and knowing that you're not great at combat, that also doesn't help. And the fact that you do need to use a flashlight most of the time, because that's literally how dark it is, and that seems to take away the ability to have a weapon ready. So if an enemy would come up out of nowhere, a creature or something, which again, I think is really weird because you don't see a lot of it, but it's radiation, it's quarantine zone, you're in some weird lab areas that are completely dark, there's water overrunning some just completely dilapidated areas. You know there's gonna be monsters, right? Like something's gotta be going on. That's just going on through your head until some stuff happens. And ultimately, like that for me made it incredibly creepy. And like I said, knowing that, well, you're not really great at combat, so if you do run into a monster, you're gonna have to be prepared. And there's a combination of things that play into that. And obviously, I think the one thing they did do is a really good job of setting the environment, the audio, the visuals, all of that stuff really plays into a very creepy environment to explore, and they did a fantastic job at that. So as I went over before, the gameplay is essentially a first-person survival crafting style game with some puzzles added to it. There's a lot of opportunities for you to be looking for things like batteries or different things to unlock certain paths to keep going, and you will discover a lot of leads, as they call them, as you're going through the game, and I'll give you some hints on which way to go. There is also one of my favorite things about the game is the metal detector. That in itself is really fun. So you'll get this metal detector really early on in the game, and as you're going, it'll go off, and if you just track where it's at, you can dig up whatever it's finding. A lot of times it will be leads, so it'll be some sort of paper that gives you some information about where you should maybe explore, what's kind of important about that area, or if nothing else, like just some cool stuff. But the reason I bring it up is because it does feel like you're never at a loss of where to go, and I did really appreciate that, especially from a game that doesn't just outright tell you where to go. And that's always a concern for me with a lot of games, is I kind of need a, hey, go over here, dummy, like kind of instruction. It gets to be sometimes where I even forget what I was doing. I don't know if any of you have experienced that yourself, but I definitely have. And so it's nice to have that, but in this game, I didn't really need it. And I think part of it is, yes, it's a shorter game, so you had less of a chance to forget what you're doing or to kind of get wrapped up in anything else. But also, they just do a really good job with pacing, and I do think that has to be applauded. So now, as far as some of our more traditional rankings that we put on games, graphically, the game looks really good. As I said before, the environment really helps you buy into this situation, and it really does help immerse you. I also had no problems with performance in the slightest. Everything ran really well. And while I would say, like, visually, it didn't compete with some of the games I've been playing recently, like Assassin's Creed, I think it still holds up pretty well. Audio, on the other hand, is fantastic. And whether it be just the different devices that you have, like I said, with the metal detector, or when you're roaming around in these dilapidated labs and military bases, and it's super dark and creepy, and you can hear something off in the distance, that sort of thing, fantastic, excellent. That, for me, is one of the best parts of the game. Now, ultimately, I would give this game about a 7 out of 10. I know that seems a little bit low, but if I'm being honest, I felt like the price was pretty high for how long a game is. A game that is $60, which I thought was a good price until I realized it was only like a 10-hour game, and being one of those games that once you finish the story, for me, at least my experience, I didn't really want to go back in. There was no mysteries and anything left. Now, I'm sure that there are some, and there's going to be some DLC, but I'm sure they're also going to charge you for it. Even if not, it's really hard to grade something based upon DLC that may or may not come out. My other issue too would just be the controls were a little off. They weren't bad, and the game is definitely playable. There were just some times where interacting with certain items didn't seem to work all the time. And most of this, I think, just has to do with a little bit of polish, some stuff like that. Nothing major, but I think for the price and the length, that lack of polish is definitely something that you notice, or at least I did. So ultimately, yeah, the game for me sits at a 7 out of 10. I think it's a good experience, and if you are interested in that style of game, I think you're going to appreciate it. If you are looking for the next Fallout, yeah, this is not it. Don't buy it for that. But it definitely has its own merits about it that I think are worth experiencing. Now, is that something you should probably experience on a sale? I don't know. I probably would advise a sale pickup, but that's just me. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comment section. Anything and everything is much appreciated. I love each and every one of you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.